We're talking about the next Tales collection in this. This is Tales of the Bounty Hunters. Now, technically, I believe Tales from Jabba's Palace was published before, but we're going chronologically, and that's how they have it in this collection. So there's only 5 stories in Tales of the Bounty Hunters, and they all center around the meeting with Vader on the Super Star Destroyer in Empire Strikes Back, and how all these bounty hunters kind of hunt for Han Solo. So we'll start with Kevin J. Anderson's story, Therefore I Am, the tale of IG-88, which is about IG-88's creation, how it becomes a bounty hunter, how many IG-88s there actually are, and how IG-88 tries to become Skynet and take over the second Death Star. That's really it. What did I think of this story? It's dumb, but very entertaining. And it actually is foreshadowing for what Kevin J. Anderson would do with Dune the Butlerian Jihad, because IG-88 acts just like Omnius does in that. I'm more forgiving to Star Wars, because Star Wars is more pulpy than Dune is. What would I rank this story? It's like a 3 out of 5. It's okay. It's goofy. It is memorable, though, so I'll give it credit there. Next, we have Payback, The Tale of Dengar by Dave Wolverton. And this is a much better story about Dengar, from his reasoning for hunting Han Solo, because Han Solo did him wrong in the past when they were like teens, I guess. And Dengar was badly injured in a racing accident. The Empire made him essentially into like a super soldier and took his emotions away, and how he meets Malaru, who is his love that's in the Bounty Hunter Wars. And it kind of goes through all of Empire into Return of the Jedi, and kind of ends where Bounty Hunter Wars picks up. It doesn't work. What you got to understand is that these Tales of the Bounty Hunters, well, they pretty much contradict the Marvel comics, simply because the Marvel comics were not considered canon when these were written. They also, if they reference the Bounty Hunter Wars, which this one and the next one kind of should tie into that, but they don't. It's because K.W. Jeter did whatever K.W. Jeter felt like, and messed with continuity, and was just overall the Bounty Hunter Wars is god awful. I will be talking about that soon enough. But just so you know, this story and the next one, they do not fit with the Bounty Hunter Wars. They just don't. And that's a shame on Lucasfilm for allowing that to happen. And it's a shame on them for allowing K.W. Jeter to write after writing those god awful Blade Runner sequels. Like, come on. It's not my favorite Dave Wolverton story, but it's pretty good. I give it a 4 out of 5. Next, The Prize Pelt, The Tale of Bossk by Kathy Tyers. This is about a human woman and a Wookiee teaming up with Bossk right after the meeting on Vader's Star Destroyer, and they convince Bossk that Chewbacca and Han Solo are going to be rescuing a bunch of Wookiees from a slave planet, and they just plan to get one up on Bossk. And that's really the story. The problem with this story is it doesn't Bossk isn't the main character. It's these characters, which they may or may not be West End Games characters. They kind of felt like they were, but honestly, I couldn't care less. They were both really boring characters. Bossk is neat, which is the only thing that keeps this from being horrible. But this is the worst story in this collection, by far. It's the worst Star Wars story that I have ever read from Kathy Tyers, which is really disappointing because I like Kathy Tyers a lot. This one just doesn't do it for me, and it doesn't work with the Bounty Hunter Wars either. And it's just, I won't spoil why, but it just doesn't make sense. Whereas Dave Wolverton's, you could kind of explain some of it away if you've read Dengar's story and then read the Bounty Hunter Wars. There is kind of if you squint at it, they may line up okay, sort of deal. But yeah, I don't like the prize pelt. I give it a 2 out of 5. It's not very good. Next, Of Possible Futures, The Tale of Zuckuss and 4-LOM by M. Shane Bell. This is about Zuckuss and 4-LOM, as well as the woman from Echo Base that's directing the ion cannon, I believe. So, after the meeting on Vader's Star Destroyer, Zuckuss and 4-LOM take a strategy that is, we'll capture a bunch of rebels and set a trap for Han, Leia, and Chewie. Okay, that's fine. And I didn't mention, Zuckuss is Force sensitive. He's not a Jedi, but he can see possible futures, and he is dying. His species can't handle breathing in oxygen, and he ended up having some sort of compromise in his suit, and it's ruined his lungs, and he's in a lot of pain. And so he and 4-LOM are trying to get this bounty money so they can get some illegally cloned lungs put into Zuckuss. And I won't spoil too much of this story, but this one was very interesting. If it wasn't for the last story, this would have been my favorite. It is also the only one of these stories that didn't get an official audiobook. So the other stories all got little cassette audiobooks, and you can find them on YouTube. But this is the one that never did, and it's a shame. I would have expected the prize pelt to not get one because it's bad, but then again, it is Kathy Tyers. And Kathy Tyers probably still had clout from Truce of Bakura, so that kind of makes sense that exists. What would I rank this one? It'd be a good 4.5 out of 5. It's a very good story. Lastly, we have The Last One Standing, The Tale of Boba Fett by Daniel Keyes Moran. Now, Daniel Keyes Moran also wrote... he wrote in each one of these tales. He wrote the other Boba Fett tale in Tales of Jabba's Palace, but he also writes the Devaronian's tale in Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, which is referenced, actually, in this story, and it gives that Devaronian story a conclusion, which is nice. But this is Boba Fett over the years, because this, unlike with the previous ones, where they've mostly stayed within the movie they're based on, the climax of this takes place probably right before Spectre of the Past by Timothy Zahn, so way near the end of the New Republic part of the timeline before we get into NJO. And it is Boba Fett and Han Solo are just getting older, and inevitably they come to it comes to a head. They end up in like a duel, and it's whoever the last one standing. There's more to it. This was the big reveal of a lot of Boba Fett's backstory prior to Attack of the Clones, which, if you're a casual fan that stopped reading after when NJO happened, which a lot of people did, they claim that Attack of the Clones contradicts this. But I'll tell you what, people love Boba Fett. Everything's been retconned, and Boba Fett, out of all the Star Wars characters, with the exception of the Sarlacc pit nonsense, everything in his timeline for him makes sense. The Sarlacc pit is the one misnomer between Star Wars 81 and then Dengar's Tale versus Tales of the Bounty Hunter, not Tales of the Bounties, Bounty Hunter Wars. That's the one goof, but this works with him being called Jaster Muriel and being banned from Concord Dawn, which was later retconned. Jaster Muriel was a person that actually took Jango Fett in when he was a foundling, in Jango Fett Open Seasons. He was a real Mandalorian person in the Star Wars timeline, and Boba Fett would have been told about him because that was Jango's hero. I mean, he died in Jango's arms due to an error from Montrose. All of that has been explained, and so when Boba Fett goes into hiding at the end of the Clone War, he takes the pseudonym of Jaster Muriel, and so that's how you make that make sense. And there is stuff that just explains all that. But it is a very fascinating story, and everyone says Kenobi is the Star Wars Western, right? I've even said that. This is the most that Star Wars has ever felt like a Western. It's fascinating, and the juxtaposition of Han Solo versus Boba Fett, where Boba Fett has not done well since getting out of the Sarlacc. He never fully recovered, and he's just fallen apart. Meanwhile, Han has had, there's been a lot of adventures since then, and he's come across Boba Fett too, and with the whole connection to the Dark Empire trilogy, that's referenced in this. So Han knows that Boba Fett's still alive, obviously. But he's just bored. He's hit a point where his life's really comfortable, and he wants to go smuggling again. And he's just left alone because Chewie went to visit his family, and Leia's on a diplomatic mission for the New Republic. And he doesn't want to go to this dinner with Luke, and he can't get a hold of Lando, so he's like, I'm gonna go do this smuggling job that I was planning to do for this person before I took the job with Luke and Obi-Wan. And it turns out it was a trap by Boba Fett. That's just clever. And then Boba Fett's he fell for this trap 20 years later? Okay. And Boba Fett drops everything he's doing and goes over there, and they have a showdown, and it's left open, and that's the really nice thing. Now we know what happens to Boba Fett, obviously, and it's not him in Young Jedi Knights. I think that the Holocron people made that clear. That's his daughter impersonating him. In that, because he doesn't act like Boba Fett in that, and so the Last One Standing was the final Boba Fett story until we get to NJO and that Tales story where he's I've been working with the Vong, the whole the Mandalorians have sided with the Vong. Good luck, Han Solo. That's a little story there. And then he shows up, of course, in Unifying Force, I believe. But then Karen Traviss had to retcon with her worst story she's ever written, Boba Fett, a Practical Man, where, as I recall, the story there's a description that the Mandalorians are the third side of a two-sided dagger with the Jedi and the Sith, which is easily one of the dumbest things that Karen Traviss has ever written, and that's saying a lot after sitting through True Colors, which is one of the worst Star Wars books ever written. That wasn't written by Karen Miller. But this is what I consider the last solid Boba Fett story before we get to the Denningverse and nonsense with Boba Fett, where why do we have Boba Fett in this? He's older than the Hills at this point. But then again, I don't know why Han, Luke, and Leia are in Legacy of the Force other than to sell books. Just let them retire after NJO. They're all old. Let Jaina be the main character. Why even have Jaina if you're not going to do that? Why even bother? But anyway, that's getting into the weeds. What do I think of Last One Standing? It's a perfect 5 out of 5. It is truly the reason you should read this book, and the rest of them are all fine. You could probably skip The Prize Pelt by Kathy Tyers. It's not good. But I probably recommend the rest. So, what would I rank this Tales book? I'd probably give it a 4.2 out of 5. It's very good. It's not as good as Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. It's not as clever as that book was. And it's probably the weakest of the three, if I'm being honest. But I like the idea of having less stories, but they're longer. Except for The Prize Pelt. That felt too long for what it was. It was neat. I get why they never went out of their way to do something like this again until the new canon. Because yes, there is Tales of the Empire and Tales of the New Republic. Tales of the New Republic is West End Games stories that weren't published, and Tales of the Empire was reprinting West End Games stories from like the Adventure Journal. That's what those are, and that's a kind of a different beast altogether at that point. But they never did like the Tales of the Pod Racers, although they did those fruit snack comics. I don't even think they ever really published until the Wild Space omnibuses in the 2000s or early 2010s. But anyway, that's all I have. I'll see you next time.